Hello, everybody. This is Debbie Eno from Teacher Success Coach with another episode of the Female Educators Roundtable and discussing homeschooling, home educating. It depends on what part of the world you're from. You might be saying homeschooling or you might be saying home educating. It doesn't really matter. It means the same thing. So here I am with another episode with another fantastic home educator, homeschooler, would be telling us about her journey, what it's been like, what were the triumphs, what are the triumphs, what are the challenges, what works, and whether or not she try, as some homeschool educators do, try to replicate the school system and then realizing, hello, this doesn't work. I take them out of the system. So why am I trying to put the system back into them? So she's going to share her journey with us. Welcome, 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 Christy. Tell us where you come from and tell us, about you and your home education journey. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much, Debbie. I am thrilled to be here. So my name is Christy Gandera, and the name of our homeschool back in the day was the Gandera Bug Academy, because I called my children my little bugs, because kids are always bothering you like little bugs do. But I've rebranded my name to Happy Hive Homeschooling, because that's what we all want. We want our kids in a nice, safe, happy hive where they can buzz out and do their thing, and then they feel safe and welcome to come back. So I homeschooled my 3 children here in California. I live in the United States. And here there are very flexible. It's one of the most flexible places in the United States to home educate your children. So I feel very blessed that God put us in a place where it's easy to do. It's easy to home educate here.
Okay. Tell us how long you have been home educating your children and what was the drive for you to home educate your children?
I started homeschooling my kids in 2006. So my oldest at the time was just five years old, typical kind of kindergarten age here in the United States. And my motivation, and I've always been honest about this, my motivation was fear. I didn't want my children to be away from me. I didn't want to give the responsibility to another adult. And then because I was a teacher myself, you're probably going to love this, Debbie, but I was like, there's no better teacher than me. Like, I'm an incredibly awesome classroom teacher. I love every minute of being in the classroom with my students. Why wouldn't I give that gift to my children? So I was afraid to let them go, from the nest, from the hive. And then I just was like, you're the best there is. Why would you give them to anyone else? So that's why I chose to home educate. So currently my children are youngish, early adults. I have a 19-year-old, a 20-year-old, and a 21-year-old. So 2 of them have chosen a college journey, I think a university, so they go to university, and 1 has chosen just to plow herself right into the workforce. And I'm happy and supportive of those decisions after their homeschool journey.
Thank you. So when they were home with you, you actually taught them according to the national curriculum, so you kind of prepare them for university while they were home with you. How did you do that?
Well, I don't want to say that I did follow kind of a national curriculum, or what we have here, we call them standards. So things that you're absolutely supposed to teach kids. Because even in my own classroom, I believe that kids learn naturally, and they're going to learn what they need in order to pursue any avenue that they choose. And trade schools are important, university, college is important, going into the workforce and being being an entrepreneurial thinker, even though you're an employee. Those things were important to me. So while you want to teach your kids to read and write and do math and have an appreciation of history and the arts and things, I really invented my own way of doing things.
Okay, so like what? How did you teach them maths? How did you teach them English? Was it indoor activity? Did you actually take them out? Tell us about the journey.
So the journey evolved, from being a classroom teacher, and I thought that buying a curriculum would be a great idea. So I did research and I looked, and then suddenly we were a one-income family. I couldn't afford to buy curriculum to teach my children. So I knew that I was going to have to kind of invent it myself. So back in 2006, this is your little history lesson, but of course there was the internet, but it's still kind of pretty young in what it does. Pinterest didn't come about until 2010. So that whole idea of, finding things online, I was doing some major research in order to expose the kids. So I did what I liked best, which might sound selfish, and I used books. So I would use literature to kind of guide how we would learn everything and package it together in kind of a nice unit study. So when they were really little, we did, like on pirates. So I would just make up these activities about the pirates, and they found their treasure, and then they would have to add how much treasure they found in this corner of the room or in the backyard. Wherever I hid the treasure, they had to go find the treasure, and then they had to add it up together. Things like that.
It's interesting though. Thank you. It's the interesting thing is when you have actually started your homeschooling journey, there were not as many resources as they have now. So you had to invent things.
Correct.
So correct. With the beginning when you started your homeschool to later on in your school journey, what was the difference and how did you find them?
Gosh, Debbie, that's an excellent question, because you're right. Things did change exponentially. So by the time we got into the middle school, high school years, there were things online and internet activities for the kids to do. There were even virtual schools that you can enroll your children in, and here some of us consider that home education as well. So for certain classes, things that were above me, I have to admit, I had no interest in learning, high school calculus again, or, the sciences, things of that nature. I would have the kids pick a class from a list and enroll them in those classes. So in the younger years, I was inventing everything. And then as they progressed, either they figured it out on their own, which might sound mean, if you needed to learn how to diagram sentences, I would tell them, well, look it up, let's figure this out. Or I would enroll them in a class. But that's neat to kind of look back and see the progression of my journey.
Thank you. You say it was mean getting them to find out themselves. But as a teacher, you know for yourself, once students actually go and find the information themselves, they would never forget it. When you hand it to them on the plate, they don't have any interest in trying to deep dive to get it themselves. But the minute they get it for themselves, the minute they actually go and search, there's some level of appreciation whereby they're thinking, oh yes, I now understand this. So I just think it's fantastic because you start them only to do their own research. So which means when they get to university, that becomes second nature to them. They know exactly what to do. So you taught them how to think critically. Now, they're not in schools, as you know, the students are not taught how to think critically, and they're not critical thinkers. So when you look at that, there are issues there. Another question is in terms of how would you see home education in relationship to the traditional education? What are the pluses and what are the minuses of both institutions?
Another great question. You sure know how to pack them in there. First of all, I really believe that there's no, I call it, what I say is there's no wrong way to homeschool, but really there's no wrong way to educate. Families have got to choose what works best for them. So I lean in not raising anything above another. But what worked for me as far as homeschooling goes is I was able to be with my children from the time they were in kindergarten until the time they were in 6th or 7th grade, because that's when they really did start to do, things on their own. And when you compare that to my classroom experience, here in California, our school year is 180 days long. So I had a child that I loved and poured my heart and soul. I had lots of them, but I only had 180 days. So it took so long to get to know them and how they learned and how I could adjust things to best fit their style. And then I started to teach them, and gosh, their little light bulbs would start going off. And then I had to say goodbye and I had to give them to another teacher. But with homeschooling, I'm able, of course, I know my children because I've known them since birth, but in an education system, I got to know how they learned, the things they were interested in. And then it was a continual process of learning without any breaks, there were interruptions, but I think you can understand what I'm trying to say is it went much smoother because I was working with the same group of students.
Yeah, that is so true. It's like, as you was talking about that, I just began to visualize and I said, it is so true because at least, you carry them through the end. But as a teacher, we don't carry them through the end. We carry them halfway and we just have to drop them and leave and pick up another set. So it does make a difference in terms of, continuity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it really does. So therefore, in terms of how you taught your children, did you teach them outdoor? You teach them indoors? How, give us a typical day. Give us a typical day.
It was both outdoors, indoors, at the park. For a long time, we only had one car. So wherever we could walk was where we could go. But education is everywhere. So I told my children that every day was a school day. So, they're kind of comparing to what happens, what they saw on TV, what they heard, their cousins saying, things like that. Like, well, we get spring break or we get this off. And I said, no, you don't. Every day is a school day. Everything is learning. So we would do a lot of things on the weekends too. When my husband was home, it would look like a normal family trip to the museum, but it was a school day for them. Even I told them on Christmas, you have school on Christmas. The activities that we choose to do are learning. So they're learning life skills about wrapping the presents and, preparing the meals and the traditions and things. So since every day was a school day, we could make use of those opportunities. When we had a car, we could go, or when we didn't, we stayed home. But we also schooled in lots of places around the house. So a change of scenery is quite the amplifier to academics.
Thank you for that. What I find is really nice It's like you get the children to come along with you, saying to them that every day is a learning day, every day is a school day. So therefore they know every day they're getting something out of it. So you don't have to be in the institution to be educated. And I think that is so important. And I think that's what really make or break students' attitude to learning. Because when they don't feel part of it and they see themselves outside of it, A, they don't learn, and B, they don't enjoy it. Because I said to my students, right now I teach sociology. So I said to my students, every time and everything you do is sociology. So you need to eat, dream, sleep sociology. I said, because you are living in society. And part of society is sociology. So for you to understand it, you need to be part of it. And I think it's so very important, because the minute you tell children, okay, when you're at school, you learn, then the children start compartmentalizing the whole thing. So therefore, they don't understand when you say, okay, you know, we're going down the street, and I want you to check the change, and I want you to, you know, that box over there, it's a square box. You know what squares are, you know the equal, you know, the equal sides, etc. So I think it's so important that children begin to feel part of it. And another factor is, in terms of home educating or homeschooling, do you think that it prepares do you think that it had prepared your children for understanding what they want to do and navigating the real world out there? How do you think that you homeschooling them actually prepared them for out there?
I think that that is a long game. And this is where families get frustrated with that. I wonder if it's going to work. I wonder if it's going to prepare them. And I'm really proud of the children that my husband and I homeschooled, that we raised, and the decisions that they're making in life. And it doesn't mean that they're not going to make a wrong decision ever, because of course we only learn by making mistakes. But I do believe that they're prepared, and I can see that in what they communicate to me, what they ask me as they journey. My middle child doesn't live at home anymore, so she's independent and able to manage her own little household. Things like that. She knows how to run the dishwasher and cook for herself. It does prepare them for life as part of not only homeschooling, but parenting as well.
Thank you. So in terms of the decision, let's say when you during the journey of homeschooling your children, you know, how did they decide? What gave them the indication to decide, okay, I want to go to university, or I want to go to college, or I want to, you know, go to work, etc. What do you think prepared them to, at this stage, know exactly what I wanted to do?
I think that I tried to fairly present what the options were after high school, and to let them know what I was preparing them for. I did let them know that I was preparing them for college, that I do believe in a higher education. And I told them, based on my own experience, that I loved college because I truly that was the first time in my education that I got to pick what I wanted to learn. So I gave them those options of choosing college. So my middle child, the one that is just my worker bee, and she doesn't attend, she tried it for a while and didn't like it. And I'm going to be honest, it was hard for her to admit to me that she didn't want to go to college, because she thought she would be disappointing me. And I tried to tell her that, well, this doesn't mean you'll never choose to go to college. You can go to college anytime you want to, you know. 80-year-old women and men go to college if that's what they want. So I'm not disappointed, but that made me proud as crazy as that sounds, it really made me proud that she stood her ground, that she didn't like the schoolwork, she didn't like college for whatever, and that she decided she wasn't going to go on that journey just because she thought I wanted her to. So that's a goal of home education, is to give our kids those options and to show them that the world is their oyster.
You know, I'm just sitting here nodding my head because I spoke to some students last week and I'm saying to them, okay, so what do you guys want to do? A number of them tell me that don't want to go to university, but they're forced to go to university because the school is saying that they have to, you know, it's like preparing them for university. I say, well, you guys need to go to university and these are the options, these are the topics you should choose, etc. And some of them hate it. And I said, well, okay, the fact that you hate it, it means that when you get there, you would not be doing a good job because you're not really in it. And it's really good because, you know, another thing is a lot of the students feel, the young people feel pressured. And they're so programmed and conditioned that when you've done this, you know, when you've done, you go through the system, the next step is university, even though university is not complementary of every child, every young person. But they're just going through the process because it is an expectation. And it's really nice that you made your children know that I don't expect it. And, you know, although your daughter felt you might be disappointed, and it's really nice when you're reassuring her that, no, I'm not disappointed. You know, you do what you feel called to do. And I think this is really nice. And I think in the education system, that's what I feel that we do not have. Because the fact that you were also in the education system, so therefore you know that, okay, I am going to do things differently. So it's, you know, it's interesting. It's interesting in terms of that. Another question is, so you actually had, okay, from 2010, I think we had more online systems, right? So from that time, you started getting your children to pick certain subjects. So how, you know, how did they, what actually identify the choices, what actually enabled them to choose whatever they wanted to choose to do in depth?
I think what helped them choose was the foundation from before. Having a mother who's a teacher is a blessing, a curse, I'm not quite sure, but I would tell them, you know, these are the subjects I'd like for us to cover. What would you like to do? Spending time in the public library here was great because they would bring home stacks of books and then they would be like, oh, I like this, I don't like this, I like this, I don't like this. So from a point where my children were like, you know, I'm really interested in the Revolutionary War. And I would say, great, we can do that for history. You know, you could do that for history. And another one was very into gardening. She loved the backyard garden. And I said, well, we can make this kind of science. And so we would go from there. So it's kind of just talking to your kids about what they want to learn, exposing them to many topics, but being willing to give up. So, for example, if I said, you know, we could learn about the American Revolution, we could learn about world history, and we could learn about ancient history, say, and they dabble in it, but don't like it. Even though I've done tons of research on ancient history, and I love ancient history, like I just want to deep dive. When they say, no, Mom, I'd rather study the Revolutionary War, I just go, that sounds great. I'm glad you're passionate about that. Let me know how I can support you.
So the beautiful thing is, you know, they actually learned what they enjoy learning about and what they enjoy doing. But as you know, in the mainstream education, they don't have those choices.
No, not at all.
No, not at all. You know, And the fact that they're told, okay, we're doing X, we're doing Y. If you don't like it, well, there isn't a lot of choices. You just have to do it. So in terms of, let's say when you were teaching a topic, how long did you stay on teaching the topic, and what determined the length of time you stay on the topic?
That's a good question. People get uncomfortable with my answer to this, as they studied it as long as they wanted to until they weren't interested anymore. And that kind of goes back to, I wasn't worried about any standards. So if my children never learned a certain aspect of history, now they're adults and they're watching things, the news, the whatever, and they're exposed to, some pondering question, and it's related to the history of things. They have all the tools they need to learn that piece that, quote, someone would say was missing. I didn't feel the need to give them. There's no such thing as a complete education. So things would take as long as they would take. As long as I had interested children, we kept moving forward with it. And you can kind of tell they're like, okay, I'm done. I'm ready to move on.
Thank you. Do you think that's a good thing, though?
I don't know. It worked for us. So I think it's a good thing. But I think education also has to be, I lost the word I was looking for, customized. So what works for one family doesn't work for another. I know you had mentioned, we don't necessarily want to do a school at home approach. And while I understand that in theory, sometimes that works really well. So that would mean that we would learn a topic for a quarter, for a semester, for a year, something, based on the way they do it in school. So sometimes that really worked. Sometimes it didn't. And some families it really works for, and some families it doesn't. So I hope that helps clarify a little.
Thank you. It's interesting though, because one of the things I like about homeschooling, home educating is, the children would learn, the young person would learn the topic until they get tired of it. And it's really nice because in terms of contents, in the education system, what frustrates us as teachers, and I'm sure you as well, the fact that we are not able to finish teaching the contents. It's like we scratch on the surface and then we move on. So the children don't get enough to even understand or enjoy it. What are your thoughts?
That's a good reminder. That what we thought we were doing in school was exposing them to that wide variety of things, but we never showed them how to deep dive. So at home, I'm exposing them to all these different topics that they have to choose from. And we do a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. What do you want to do more of? Then they learn what it is to actually do a deep dive. So now when they're adults and they need to learn, think of all the things, gosh, that come up. We just figure it out. Even as a business owner, when someone hacked into my website, I had to figure that out. I'm not a website person. So I had to do a deep dive. I had to learn. When the washing machine stops working, my husband looks things up and he's like, oh, I found how to repair the washing machine. He dives in and he learns. So the kids know how to go deep. And I think that's the critical thing, is they learn how to learn when you're able to do that, when you're able to give a topic adequate time.
That's very true. I like that. They learn how to learn, because in the education system, they don't learn how to learn and they don't learn how to think. So they become non-critical thinkers. They become like, okay, I don't want it probably sounds wrong, but sorry, I'll have to say it. They become like robots. you just program the things in. Okay, store it in there for me for later on, which when the exam comes, you need to take that out and put it on the exam. And that I find really sad, because a few weeks ago, I've actually went, in the staff room, I was saying to my colleagues, what frustrates you as a teacher? And then when when they told me, I just started laughing, because that seems to be something that frustrates all teachers, not being able to teach the curriculum in any great depth. It's like a piece of this and a piece of that. And the time you as a teacher start really getting into it and enjoying it, you need to move on to something else. And the student haven't enjoyed, what you actually have been enjoying. So therefore, you just have to move on. And they say to you, oh, Miss, I didn't understand that. Okay, I hear that, but you need to go and look at it for yourself later on, because we need to get to the next topic.
I can't tell you how many times I unfortunately had to say that very thing to students. Yes, I'm so sorry, sweetheart. We have to move on. Or I had a team of teachers where they literally had to leave my classroom at a time to go to the next classroom. So no matter what was happening, no matter how much learning was going on, no matter how important that question was, you can't be late for your next class. You have to go. Where in homeschooling, I had times in my mind, I mean, I didn't want to homeschool from sun up to sundown. But if we were really passionate about the story we were reading and making the puppets to go along the story, and I kind of glanced at the clock and I was like, oh, we're normally switching to math about this time, I could tell or even ask them, hey guys, it's time for math. Do you want to move on to math for today, or should we give this 15 more minutes? You could even ask, how long do you think we need to finish this project and to feel satisfied in order to move on? And they get to choose, they get to answer you, where there's, there's always this constraints of a day. The day's always going to end and something's always going to be hanging over to be done for the next day. But you're right, there's that comfort. And I would say we didn't get to math today. We have to make sure we do math first tomorrow, because you can't get into a habit of skipping the same subject every day. But yeah, it's so true.
Mm-hmm. And and that's one of the joy, when I listen to parents who educate homeschool, that's one of the joy of of spending the time on that. They want to actually learn a lot more on, let's say, on the family, for example. So therefore, you have the time to spend that time to learn in depth about the family. I don't say, okay, well, we cannot stay long, we need to finish off now and move on. And even when you're actually teaching and you have, although you plan your lesson, you time it, etc., there must be a time when you haven't finished your planning and you're finishing it, because it's like one of my lessons today, finish it in halfway and you're thinking, oh, I need to pick that up on Monday, but will I have time because they've got exams next week? So that you have to say to them, okay, guys, you need to learn this by yourself. And if there are any issues, just come and talk to me about it, because you have no time to go back to it, because you're constantly running and skating. And, listening to people talking about home educating, that's one of the beauty. And that's one of the things that people need to connect with, that the young person could finish off what they started. And I think that is so beautiful.
I agree.
I agree.
That's the part about homeschooling. That's hard for me to get. Families that I work with to understand. I never finished my curriculum. as a teacher. All the things they told me I had to teach a fourth grader. 19 years, I never finished once. But I am confident that those children had a wonderful experience. Period. So with my own children, I knew that idea that you have to finish was not a mindset that I wanted to embrace at all. I wanted to embrace a mindset of continual education. And where I left off when they graduated high school is now their responsibility to pick up and continue to learn. So I know exactly what you're saying in the, oh, I didn't finish. And gosh, imagine their brains on Monday. They're not even going to remember where you were. So to pick up again on Monday, what do you sacrifice? What do you squeeze in? It's a juggling act. It's a juggling act. But homeschool families have a gift of time and flexibility and choice. But I find they're always worried about doing it wrong. And that's why I came up with there's no wrong way to homeschool.
Yeah, thank you. So why do you think that they feel that they're wrong sometimes? What is it you think, making them feel like that?
They feel like they're wrong because they're not teachers. And they feel like they're wrong because maybe they're not using a formal curriculum, or they don't know how to use a formal curriculum. I think that they might have this ideal that teachers know it all and do it all, and they had special training. I am not diminishing anyone's special training or my own as a teacher, but they didn't really teach me to teach. You can't teach anyone anything. I had to learn how to become a teacher the day I stepped foot in a classroom. So a parent telling me that they're not a teacher, I'm like, no, you are. You have been since the day your child was born. So people are afraid. They're afraid of failures. What if I do it wrong? Number one. And what if I mess the kids up and the kids are behind? So there's some arbitrary place that every, fifth grader is supposed to be in our minds. And if my child isn't there, that's a bad thing. And it isn't a bad thing. That's what I mean by, if my kids didn't learn world history when I was homeschooling them, they can learn it now. My daughter that's choosing not to go to college, whatever she's not learning in college, she can either learn it on her own without paying, or she can choose to go to college. It's out there. There's no behind. Kids, your children are not behind, and there's no finishing. You'll never finish. I didn't have enough time with my children to get everything done that I wanted to make every memory that I wanted to make. And that's just the way it's always going to be.
Thank you. That's interesting, because you see, in the education system, you don't have that, because of all the programming. So it's quite nice, in terms of, people are actually seen and be reassured that you don't have to be a teacher to be home educated. And I think, as you rightly said, this is one of the biggest fear. There seems to have, I'm not knocking teachers, but there seems to have teachers on this pedestal and think that because they're teachers, they know it all. And sadly, this is what children have been programmed to think. I keep on saying this on my platform because I was in a school last year, and my manager said to me, oh, I'm not supposed to tell the students when I don't know something. I said, really? I said, hell no. I said, well, exactly. I said, when I go in and I said to them, I said, you know what? I said, they asked me a question, I don't know. She said to me, oh, you have to be the authority. I said, I am the authority on my subject. I said, I know my subject inside out, but if I don't know something, I'm going to say, I don't know. Let's find it out. No, I'm not supposed to. Really? And that actually caused conflict between us, because my thing is, it's okay for the student to see that I don't know. So they see that I am also human and I need to look things up. So why should I pretend that I know it and it's going to fail me? Because after a while, these young people are so smart, they see right through you. So that is something I'm constantly encouraging teachers. When you don't know something, you said to say, you know what, I don't know, let's look it up. I say, you know what, let's look it up. Well, I'm sure you guys are going to find it before me, and then we discuss it, because they need to know that we don't know.
Yeah, that's very powerful. They need to know that we make mistakes. They need to know that we don't know everything, and they need to know we trust them to find the information. So when you just said, let's look it up, I'm so thankful to live in a time where we can do that. Our children here mostly have some sort of electronic device that connects to the internet right inside, our classroom. So let's look it up, and you guys are going to do it. I bet you could do it before me. And then let's talk about what you find. It's so empowering. And so that same dynamic can happen at home. I knew my kids would, quote, outsmart me. I've spent a lifetime focusing in on fourth grade. So by the time they get to middle school and high school, I knew they were going to be, learning things I wasn't interested in. So exactly, they would come and ask me questions, and I had to say that I don't know. Let's find out.
And I think it's so important that children and young people know that, because I feel they trust you more, because they know you're not going to be bluffing. They know, when you say something, oh, I don't know, let's look it up. Initially, the first thing a child will say to you in a lot of cases, well, you're supposed to be the teacher. I say, yes, I'm the teacher, but not the dictionary or not the encyclopedia. So therefore, they know, okay, I'm the teacher, but I'm the encyclopedia. Because I remember in one of the schools I taught in, students always said to me, Miss, how can you spell this? I said, I'm not a walking dictionary. So you need to look it up. But you see, the misconception, and we seem to still plug in and reinforcing that teachers have all the answers. And I think that is setting us up to fail. That's why when people say, oh, teachers are superheroes, no, don't tell me I'm a superhero, because you have too much high expectations. One of your expectation is, superheroes are not real. So therefore you expect me to do these things that is not real. So therefore, when I'm not able to do it, I get criticized. No, I am not a superhero. I'm not.
I love that. I love that. I honestly hadn't thought of it that way. About not being a superhero. So I like your perspective on that. I like your take on that. It does kind of set us up for failure to be something that we're not, where it's just better to model for our kids that we're trying our hardest, that we're doing the best that we can do, and that we all have tools in ourselves, to find out those answers. I like that.
It's very true. Okay, what 3 things, that's my final 3 questions. What 3 things would you say someone who would like to homeschool, but feel that they have the feeling of imposter syndrome, and they feel that they're not good enough to teach the children? What 3 things would you say to them?
So if you want to homeschool and you're feeling like you can't, I would like you to think about something else that you wanted to do and thought that maybe you would never be able to do. Maybe drive a car. When you were little, you thought driving a car was so far in the distance, but you were willing to learn how to do that, weren't you? So we all have things that we feel insecure about, or we feel like we're not good enough, or imposter syndrome, but we won't know if we could do it until we try. So I would encourage you, as someone who wants to try and homeschool, but you think you can't, to go ahead and give it a try. You won't know unless you step foot. And I would also say, get help. find someone else who homeschools, find a professional who provides services, anything, because you had someone teach you how to drive, you had someone teach you how to cook, you had someone who was there at your side doing all the hard things. So you don't have to homeschool alone. Find someone that you can relate to that will help you on your journey.
Is there another one?
Oh, I thought that was 3.
Oh, I thought that was 3.
Find someone to help.
Find someone to help.
Think about a time that you
Think
couldn't
about
do
a time that you couldn't do
that you
things
did,
Okay,
that
yes,
you
yes.
did,
and then try.
and then try.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that, because a lot of, one of the challenges a lot of parents feel, who wants to homeschool, feel that they cannot do it is because they're not, as you rightly say earlier on, they're not a teacher. So they feel that in order to homeschool or home educate the children, they have to be a teacher. But one of the things that most of the people who come on the show saying that you are the best teacher because you know your child. The teachers don't know your children. We don't know your children. We're trying to know them and we would never know them because they're not staying with us long enough. Although they're here with us in terms of the hours in the day, we still don't know them. You are the one who know them. So therefore you know how to teach them in terms of their learning style, what they like, how they like it, etc. We don't. We just, for us, it's a trial and error. And there sometimes is more trial than error, is more errors than trial.
A good way to think about it is this. Did you cook dinner tonight or breakfast or lunch? Are you a chef? Do you have to be a, Julia, what's the chef school? Do you have to go to culinary school in order to cook dinner? Absolutely not, but I haven't poisoned my family yet. So as a family who wants to educate your children, you're going to be able to do that as well. You don't have to have specialized training to complete these tasks. We do them all the time.
I like that analogy, the comparison with, being able to cook and cook for your family. So therefore, the fact that you're able to do that, of course, you're able to educate your children. I think that really is nice. That really is nice. And that's something I'm going to be throwing out on the platform. That really is nice.
Good.
Because it does make, it does make sense. And when you think of it, oh my goodness, it is true. I thought I didn't have to go to school to learn how to cook. And I haven't poisoned them yet. So of course I could educate my children. Yeah, that's really nice. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to say before we actually say goodbye to our people?
Well, thank you again for having me. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and just step confidently into your decision as a parent. You can homeschool or you can send your children to school and kind of homeschool after school and on the weekends. Don't be pigeonholed into any one way of education. So be fearless, be bold, and be brave, and go out there and educate your children.
Thank you. I like the fact that you said, do not be allowed to pigeonhole, because that's what the education system does. It pigeonhole you. And it is so nice because sadly, when people, take the children, or they still continue to pigeonhole the children until they de-school them, and then they need to actually, go through the homeschooling journey. Thank you very much for that, Christy. It was a fantastic session. Once again, another educator, another homeschooler coming on the platform, sharing the journey. Because as you say, what works for one parent may not work for another parent. So it's like, that's the beauty I feel of home educating, where you actually, not one size fit all. It's like individualism. you actually, having that into play. And I think it's beautiful because in the education system, we know one size fits all. It doesn't fit. It might be big, but you still wear it,
Yes, thank you
So
so
that's
much for
the thing.
having
Thank you
me.
so much for having me.
Thank you very much for accepting the offer. Thank you very much, my Facebook audience. And remember, this is also on YouTube. So after Facebook, after this show, we're going to put it on YouTube. So go have a look. And if you want to home educate your child, homeschool your children, do not be afraid to do it because you are the best teacher. The teachers out there are not the best teacher, you are. Take care, stay blessed, and I'll see you guys next week, Wednesday. Thanks a lot.